for this opportunity here, and we are going to start recording now, it looks like. Thanks,
Hey,
Dean.
aloha, aloha, everyone. Glad you're here. As I in the past have opened with a Hawaiian chant or an oli. This time I talked to Ashley. I'm going to start providing proverbs for you folks because this is how the Hawaiian would teach as well as learn in their activities throughout the day. So today is one that I'm going to give to you folks, and please feel free to use it anytime. You see it here on the screen. And Proverbs have what's known as a hidden meaning or kauna, uh, kind of like an underline. You have the basic translation, and then you have a poetic translation. So with this, I'd like to just say aloha kako to us all. And au'ole kamana o ka Hawaii, ma ke anu o ka loko mai kai, which means, translated literally, Hawaii is not just a state of mind, but a state of grace. Now, behind that, you have the poetic translation, meaning profoundly inspired by the spiritual and religious roots, the ocean, natural environment, and the volcanic ancestry. Hawaii is a philosophical epicenter for blending the power of the elements with the essence of humanity. So this is something that the Hawaiians would give to each other. And it's kind of like a play on words. So take it for what you like to use it for, and I wish you the best. Ahui ho, aloha.
Aloha and mahalo, Dean. That was just fantastic, very beautiful. Great way to set the tone for today. Again, welcome to everyone that is joining us. Looks like folks are still hopping on, but we've got a nice full group, almost 50 people on the call today. Again, welcome. So I'll turn it over to my colleague Pete, just by ways of introduction. I'm Ashley Norman, a utility analyst here at the PUC, and I'll be co-facilitating today with my colleague Pete Polonsky. Turning it over to you, Pete. Sorry, can you all hear Pete?
Sorry, no. My mic was muted.
Oh,
I think
okay.
I know better
Sorry.
at this point in the in virtual meetings. Apologize for that.
No worries. Thanks, Pete.
Yeah. Mahalo for that warm welcome and introduction, Dean and Ashley, and welcome everybody to this second meeting of the Commission's solicitation of feedback on the Equity Docket Work Plan. We had our first meeting 2 weeks ago, and this is our second meeting prior to the requested deadline to file comments on this work plan by August 4th. So for those of you who might have joined the first meeting a few weeks ago, this agenda might look fairly similar to you, but just for everybody's benefit, I'll just run through this. So we'll first start with a welcome and an overview and allow an opportunity for introductions, both for new folks and those who have attended meetings in this Equity Docket before. We'll then have a presentation on the Equity Docket Work Plan and proposed schedule from the Commission. These materials are also online, available on the Commission's website and our CDMS docket repository. We'll then move into two separate breakout sessions. The first will be just general on the work plan, small group sections, followed by report outs to the full group in a plenary session. We'll have a brief break, and then we'll do another breakout session for the 5 specific work plan tracks to provide feedback and foster discussion on these tracks. And we'll close with next steps and closing remarks. So the objectives of this meeting, it's twofold. To first provide an overview of the Commission's proposed work plan for the docket in case you have not had the chance to review that filing in any detail yet. And then we'll also be soliciting feedback on our proposed approach, including the outcomes, outputs, the stakeholder engagement plan, timeline, and any other factors that folks would like to provide comments on. Here are our pretty standard meeting norms by this point. We'll keep introducing these just to foster healthy discussion amongst the parties and attendees for this docket. So first and foremost, please practice equity of time. Please attempt to recognize if you are speaking a lot and consider asking someone else for their thoughts. And if you haven't spoken, please try to find a way to contribute. Because this is the second of this set of 2 work plan comment meetings, if you have participated in the first workshop, we thank you for showing up again and taking advantage of the opportunity to provide this feedback. But we would ask that you be mindful of ensuring that new participants have a chance to speak first and provide their thoughts so that the commission can hear from everybody's perspective on our proposed work plan. Additionally, please treat everyone with respect. Consider the impacts of your words and actions on others. Please accept others' lived experiences. What someone says they experience is what they experienced. No singular experience is representative of everyone's experiences. Come ready to learn and question your assumptions. Please make sure you understand others' perspectives so you can contribute to the discussion. And finally, we also have a bike rack for any comments that may not be what is currently being addressed via the discussion. We ask that you strive to stay on topic, but if you do have comments and questions that might be addressed via another format or at another time, we will record those into what we're calling our bike rack for consideration at another time. Just some logistical notes before we dive into the introductions and the presentation of our work plan. This meeting is intended as one outlet to offer feedback on our proposed work plan that does not necessarily require filing written comments. So we will be taking notes during this meeting. We have a link to the notes that we will be capturing for this docket, and these notes will also be filed following this meeting as the notes for the previous meeting were filed in the docket. We will not be recording the breakout sessions, but we will be recording the plenary sessions when we're all in this group together to ensure that staff can refer to what was said with more clarity if needed. We'll be taking notes throughout in both the breakout sessions and the plenary sessions, but the breakout discussions will offer a more anonymous way to provide feedback that the commission will still capture. Please note that messages to the Zoom chat will be captured verbatim and attributed to you. And in addition to this, we will also have an opportunity at the end of the meeting for participants to provide additional feedback that they might not have had the chance to do so during this meeting via a poll that offers another alternative to or addition to providing filed written comments. If any corrections to notes are needed, either in real time or if you're reviewing their notes that are filed after this meeting, please file public comments or email commission staff. We have our staff attorney, Mike Wallerstein's email listed here. With that, I think I'll pass it back to you, Ashley.
Thanks so much, Pete. So given the very sizable group that we have attending today, and it was the same with our round 1 of the work plan feedback meeting, we did decide for this meeting to, instead of doing a sort of round the robin introduction process, that we would just allow folks a chance to insert their name and organization as sort of a welcome and aloha in the chat. So feel free to do that now or anytime during the meeting today. We would also like to create an opportunity for any individual that has not attended one of these meetings, or particularly the last feedback meeting, which was held 2 weeks ago. Or if you just haven't attended at all and you would like the opportunity to at least say hello and introduce yourself, you are certainly welcome to come off mute right now and just say hi. So we'll open up the floor for anyone that would like to do that right now. Well, great to see that there's folks saying hello in the chat. So again, feel free to do that. And we've got the commissioners on the call too. Thank you all for joining us today. That's wonderful. And okay, if no one wants to chime in or speak up, that's completely fine. We also are going to have 2 rounds of breakout groups, and you'll certainly have a chance to introduce yourself, in those rooms. And then we will have a plenary discussion in the middle of the meeting today too, so you'll have a chance to introduce yourself then if you prefer. Okay, so again, feel free to continue to introduce yourself in the chat, and we'll go ahead and just keep moving the meeting along then. Okay, so first off, let's see, the proposed work plan. If you have not seen already, it was filed, the Commission's work plan was filed in the equity docket proceeding, which is 2022-0250 on June 23rd. In the work plan, which we'll go through in more detail, there will be a, again, opportunity today to comment, but we're gonna cover the key highlights today. One thing we also wanted to ensure we've covered, sorry, I'm just making sure. Okay, so first off, again, just a general welcome to everyone. Again, thank you for joining us today. It is an opportunity for the stakeholders for all stakeholders to be learning more about the plans that we have proposed here in the work plan, and also to offer your ideas and comments in the context of this meeting. So this really is an opportunity for you all to chime in and offer feedback today. Thank you again to those that were able to join the first round of the feedback meetings a couple weeks ago and are joining again today. Mahalo to those that are joining us today for the first feedback meeting. And again, a special welcome to anyone that's joining us for the very first meeting in this equity docket stakeholder engagement process. We'd also like to acknowledge as we kick off today's meeting, we understand there are still a few outstanding requests for participation and intervention on this equity proceeding. We recognize we haven't done everything perfectly so far in the docket, but we are certainly, it's a work in progress, and we definitely appreciate everyone's flexibility as we continue growing in the space together. And when we talk later in the meeting about types of community engagement, we can also discuss a bit more about some of the proposed community panels or community-led processes that folks might be interested in conducting. So please keep that in mind. And with that, let's go ahead and start taking a look at the work plan. So these 5 questions you'll see a few times throughout the meeting today, and they are also embedded in the work plan order. But please be thinking about these questions as you are thinking through the work plan and your feedback today. These questions include, do the 5 tracks that we've proposed cover the right topics as a starting place for the docket? Do you agree with the Commission's proposal to divide the track in 2 phases, which we'll talk more about here in a bit? Will the potential outcomes for each of those 5 tracks contribute meaningfully to improved energy equity in our state, and/or should other outcomes be prioritized? 4th question is, do the high-level timelines, which again we'll take a look at here shortly, seem feasible, reasonable, and efficient? And lastly, what methods or novel approaches should or could the Commission employ to support engagement with the community members, particularly those that don't participate in Commission proceedings? So please be keeping those questions in mind as we take a look at the work plan today. This should be familiar to many of you, and for those of you that are new, an opportunity to learn more about the 5 proposed docket work streams. And currently, these have been outlined as procedural equity, which is more of a focus on developing equity and justice within the PUC's approach or action plans. It's improving accessibility of PUC proceedings, improve community engagement and customer education. The affordability and direct payment assistance track is taking a look at options such as rate discounts, subsidies, and bill credits. The equitable siting and hosting of energy infrastructure track is taking a look at siting processes and impact on communities, the hosting of current energy infrastructure, and the impact of the closing of fossil fuel infrastructure. The 4th track, equitable access to clean energy, is taking a look at expanding participation in customer programs, exploration of community benefits packages, expanded and enhanced clean energy financing programs. And lastly, the utility performance track is focusing on increased reporting and transparency as a potential outcome, disconnection moratoriums, potentially modified accounting practices for non-payment. So these are just some proposed outcomes and focuses. We've also proposed that we will be engaging more directly on each of these 5 tracks in 2 phases. This first phase will be for the remainder of this calendar year 2023 into next year 2024. And that would be for the first 3 tracks of procedural equity, affordability, and the equitable siting and hosting tracks. We've proposed to then begin the exploration of the other 2 tracks in 2024, a time frame still to be determined, but giving stakeholders an opportunity, and community members an opportunity to, potentially engage in both phases, or if they have interest, if folks have interest to engage in more than one track, spreading that out a bit. So that is sort of the mindset behind the 2 phases. Also, just an overview of the proposed process. We are taking a look at or identifying and articulating the regulatory goals and approach, taking an opportunity to solicit feedback from stakeholders, then looking to assess the options for reform against the goals of that particular track, share findings and solicit feedback from stakeholders, develop a proposal for reform, solicit feedback on the proposal from stakeholders, and then finally establish and implement reforms. This is kind of the guiding process for each of those tracks. Also, in terms of the stakeholder engagement categorization, we have 3 types of stakeholder engagement sessions. The first type is educational. This will focus more on learning on relevant topics. Community sessions will be more an opportunity for listening to community perspectives, experiences, and ideas. And then the technical track, or technical sessions, I should say, are looking to develop and refine the final recommendations for reform. So those will occur at the end. And then just a kind of helpful visual for you to understand what we're proposing on those 3 types of stakeholder engagement, and certainly trying to show how they support and inform each other. But the track by track educational sessions, which, just to be clear, is for each of those 5 tracks to have an opportunity to have the educational and then also technical sessions. Those are to be, or at least proposed to be, virtual. And the community sessions, we are looking to actually create opportunities for in-person engagement, and we are definitely interested and looking seriously at Neighbor Island presence for those community sessions. Okay, so we'll get started on each of the individual tracks. Just a quick overview of each of those 5 tracks. Again, you will have an opportunity to break out by each of these 5 tracks in the later part of the meeting today. It'll actually be the second half of the meeting, but this is a chance for you to get an overview of all 5 tracks. For procedural equity, objectives proposed are improving the accessibility and the inclusivity of commission proceedings, potentially identifying and piloting improvements for procedural equity and for broader integration across all commission proceedings. Potential outputs here could include a commission policy statement on equity and/or recommendations for procedures to increase procedural equity to be scaled. This is a proposed timeline, which you will see is very similar to the 2 other tracks of phase 1, but it's helpful to kind of have a sense for the flow of the proposed timeline. And so to call it out here, the August and September timeframe are looking to be focused on accessibility improvements for procedural equity, assessing options. So again, an opportunity to explore and assess what are the options for reform in this track, educational sessions, and as you see, that's floating from August up and through, or potentially August and November. Technical sessions for this track would be in December and February, so upcoming December and then February of 2024. And then during that late calendar year, early 2024 timeframe, this would be when a drafting of the commission policy statement and or recommendations are occurring. And then on the remainder 3 months, looking to adopt policy statement and or issue recommendations as a staff report. And again, this is going to be very similar to what we've proposed on the timeline for the other two tracks as well. So let's just take a look at those. So the affordability and direct payment assistance track, objectives here include improvement of energy affordability for customers, particularly low to moderate income customers. Possible outputs here could include a recommendation of a specific rate or program for customers, could include exploring alternative ways to improve affordability across customer classes, and also potentially improve payment plans to reduce energy burden and debts. And again, you'll see that this proposed timeline very similar to what we just shared with the procedural equity track, taking the first several months beginning in August to assess potential options for ways to reform or set against goals for this track. Educational sessions here proposed for September and December, technical sessions at the end, and then a drafting of the proposal and report process occurring in the second half of this 6 to 7 month period. For the equitable siting and hosting, key objectives here are identifying ways to support equitable siting of energy infrastructure, looking to identify possible changes to siting processes that could enhance community engagement and deliver benefits to host communities. Proposed outputs here include potential staff report on the Commission's role and authority in the siting and hosting processes, a rubric for assessing the equity implications of siting, new community engagement criteria and metrics, new ways of delivering benefits to host communities, modifications to existing community benefits agreements, and or legislative recommendations. Again, the proposed timeline is similar here, with taking the first few months to explore the range and spectrum of options for this track, and then to engage in educational sessions, looking here at September and December, technical sessions again on the back end, and then draft proposals occurring December through March timeframe. So now we'll take a look at the phase 2 tracks. Again, these are sort of TBD on the timeline, but objectives here for the equitable access track include supporting equitable distribution of the benefits of clean energy to customers. Possible outputs could be recommendations for evaluating the equity implications of existing and proposed clean energy programs, recommendations for modifying existing programs and improving equitable access to those programs, potentially a new distributed energy resource or other pilot program. Again, these are just proposed and possible outputs. And then lastly, the 5th track, the utility and performance tracking. Objectives here include better alignment for equitable outcomes with utility business models, establishing ways to monitor utility performance based on energy equity, incentivizing behavior that will result in equitable outcomes. And again, possible outputs here could be community-defined metrics and outcomes, recommendations for designing and implementing potentially an LMI assistance fund, modified or new mechanisms to incentivize utilities to improve measures of equity, And lastly, identification of pilots that support energy equity. So I recognize that that is a lot, but again, you'll have an opportunity to talk further in your breakout groups. And we certainly encourage and hope that folks will. And to that end, we will have an opportunity right now to be blasted out sort of randomly into various breakout rooms. They will be led by PUC staff, so you will have a facilitator in each room and someone to kind of walk through both those 5 questions with you, as well as you know, any other elements of what we've just proposed as a general proposal on the work plan. And then keep in mind, you're going to have an opportunity to talk more specifically on those 5 tracks at another breakout session here shortly. So does anyone have any questions before we get into the breakout session? And before we do that, I do want to make sure that I've put in the chat for everyone a copy of these 5 questions too. And okay. And I don't think we're seeing anybody. I want to make sure I haven't missed anybody. Okay, and these should all be coming your way.
Hi, Ashley, may I ask a quick question?
Yes, please.
I noticed in each of the timelines of the 5 tracks, you've got like educational sessions and technical sessions. You give a little bit more explanation. I think I understand education, but there's probably more to hear about that. But I wondered what you meant by technical. Like, what is that? What purpose does that serve, and what is that?
Thanks for asking. It's a good question. So I think the best way to explain it is it will be sessions that will allow an opportunity to start looking at the elements of how to implement the proposed changes or the proposed reforms that are discussed in both the educational and listening sessions. So it's really, I think, meant to be a time to hone in on, you know, a specific approach or a specific implementation method to whatever is being determined by that particular track. Is there anyone from the PUC that would like to chime in and to help explain that further?
I think it might just be helpful to provide a quick example. So for example, you know, if we're looking at access to clean energy, or excuse me, I'll use the affordability track as an example. You know, there might be some educational sessions in which we are all gaining an understanding of the landscape of the need for utility assistance and affordability. And then a technical session might dig more into how do we want to design a low income rate? So as Ashley was mentioning, thinking educational, kind of getting everybody on the same page background, and then technical, looking at the reforms and delving into the specific aspects of those possible reforms.
This is Henry. And along those lines, when Quai offered discount rates to their employees, it increased energy consumption.
Thank you, Henry. Please feel free to join the affordability track. We'll be discussing some of those ideas in that track. So that's really great. Anybody else with sort of a general question before we break out and have a chance to even talk further in these breakout rooms? Okay. Oh,
actually,
please.
it's Layla. Sorry, I was just about to. I was curious to know how we were going to proceed with trying to include more community members into this conversation, or like how we were going to get community member input. And unless you guys already talked about that at the last meeting, I'm sorry I missed it.
By all means, this is the appropriate time to raise any questions or even ideas in that regard, because we certainly, are exploring and interested to have input on ways we can better reach out to various communities, particularly when we start looking at conducting meetings on neighbor islands. So, please, both within your breakout rooms as well as when we reconvene as a larger group, use that opportunity to share ideas. So excellent question. Okay, well, I think we're right at the time for a breakout, so this is good timing. So Pete, I turn it over to you.
Thanks, Ashley. Could you move to the next slide, please? Oh, and I'm noting the question in the chat about what breakout room you'll be in. So for this, we'll have 2 sets of breakout rooms. For this first set, we'll be randomly assigning folks to 5 different breakout rooms, just to foster discussion for the first one. You'll see a pop-up. We took a screenshot of it to give you an example on the screen that says the host is inviting you to join this breakout room. For the second breakout session, after we break and return later, you will have the opportunity to choose which breakout room you'd like to join, and those will be focused on the track specific breakout room. So if you're interested in affordability, you can join that track breakout room at that point. But at this point, we are hoping to discuss more general feedback on the work plan here. So if you could move to the next slide before I open the breakouts. We have these 5 questions, which Ashley has also put in the chat, and our facilitators will also have available for the breakout session. So these are sort of the questions we're hoping to prompt discussion during these breakout sessions. This first one, first, do the 5 tracks cover the right topics as a starting place for the docket? Do you agree with the commission's proposal to divide the tracks into 2 phases? Will these potential outcomes contribute meaningfully to improved energy equity in the state, or should other outcomes be prioritized? And I won't read the rest, but feedback on the high-level timelines, what methods or novel approaches the commission could deploy, and any other thoughts or ideas. So these are really to guide the discussion, but we're hoping this can be more of a conversation in these breakout sessions. So I will go ahead and open these. And we'll have about 20 minutes, and we'll send a reminder with about 5 minutes left before we return to have a discussion with the full group.
Looks like folks are starting to make their way back. I hope everyone had good breakout sessions. Sorry to my group, I'm sure like a lot of folks, caught up right in the middle there, even with the warning. So we'll certainly have an opportunity now to share even further as a larger group. Can everyone hear okay? Like everyone seems frozen on my end, but maybe it's just,
I can see, oh, I can hear you just fine and see most people.
Okay, great. Okay, well, welcome back again, everyone. This is an opportunity for us to share with the larger group anything that you discussed in your breakout groups. Again, this is sort of the general feedback on the work plan. If you had a chance to share in your breakout and you'd like to also share a bit more with the larger group, this is an opportunity. If you didn't have an opportunity to share with your breakout group and you'd like to offer up some comments or feedback here, that would be great as well. And we'll just kind of open it up. We have a good solid near half hour, so we wanted to create plenty of time for some deeper discussion and exchange. So who would like to start off? Tyler, I see you're off mute. Would you like to kick it off?
Sure. I wanted to ask a question to the group. I asked it in our breakout session as well. But who in attendance today, this is your first PUC docket that you or your organization have been involved with? I know we have a lot of Hawaiian Electric and PUC and DCCA employees. But is there anyone from other organizations or people representing themselves that this is your first time with the PUC?
Not to put anyone on the spot, but Paula Kiko, I saw you put your hand up. Did you want to say anything, or are you just saying hi that this is your first docket?
Oh, yeah. This is my first docket in attendance. Commitment Schools does keep track of this docket though. So we do see some of the things that come through. Yeah, it kind of seems like a little foreign language that is being spoken here. Everyone here are industry professionals. And I'm not, and that's okay. But I think that's what we need to consider when we are talking about including the public. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing. I certainly know in our breakout room, a common theme, and I think given what was shared even before the breakouts, I'm sure this occurred in other groups too, was community engagement and what are some ways and some interests, particularly on the work plan, like how are we considering the engagement of community members? It's even one of the questions that we've offered, like what are the approaches, or what other methods or approaches could the commission or us as a group of stakeholders be considering? So I certainly open up to any further comments or ideas in that respect, and or if there was something in that spirit that you were discussing in your breakout group.
Hi, it's Layla. I went on a soapbox again and mentioned that maybe we need to have different approaches to reach different kinds of people. So, maybe do surveys. Someone mentioned the focus group, like an online survey, a focus group, the commissioner meetings in different, areas. I think if we just do, I think it would be really good to just try different approaches. Mahalo.
Thank you, Layla. All great ideas. Sunny, is your hand up?
Yeah, so this is Sunny representing Kahuku Community Association. I'm also a Kahuku resident, and I guess I would kind of say that I'm a grassroots community member representing, but I think this your question brings up a good question. I think we really need to seriously think about, having robust community engagement. So I think that this meeting is a great example of how a lot of the other meetings go. So a lot of industry folks, a lot of HICO, a lot of the, regulatory people are in attendance, but many times the actual community members who are being impacted or who need to be present and whose voice needs to be heard are often not present. And even when they are present and they voice their concerns and voice their ideas or suggestions, a lot of times those things aren't, don't make a meaningful impact in the decision-making process. And so I think that's the issue, right? So, oftentimes these meetings happen, it's a formality, the decision has kind of already been made, they're going to do what they want to do. And even if there is community engagement and community voice or concern, those don't make a difference in the regulatory decision-making processes. So I think that's a frustration that a lot of times grassroots community members experience, right? Like, does my voice make a difference? Will it even make a difference? And I think the recent experience from Kahuku with Napua Makani is a prime example of the need for systemic changes. Our current model, our current system really does not allow for community engagement, meaningful community engagement. And because every system, whether it be the PUC, whether it be the BLNR, whether it be the city, county, like it all failed us in all those different processes. And this is, speaking from Kahuku's experience. And that's what led to civil disobedience, right? The last resort. So I think we really need to take those lessons to heart and really have these hard conversations that will make these meaningful changes. And I'm glad to see that, you know, those topics like equitable procedure, you know, that's being discussed, and equitable siting and affordability, you know, those are topics that oftentimes have, no, well, not often, have come up in our experiences, right? So how do we ensure that that happens in the future, happens currently with the issues that are ongoing right now, and you know, dockets that are already kind of like making movement, you know what I mean, or projects that are already making movement currently. So yeah, that's kind of my, I guess, 2 cents for now.
Thank you for sharing, Sunny. All, again, great points, particularly at the end there where you were also calling out a couple of the proposed tracks. And I would certainly, you know, love to hear more feedback from the wider group on what we've proposed. I mean, is the 5 tracks that we've set forth the right 5? Are there other tracks that we should be in consideration of? I mean, we've got this 2-phase approach that we're suggesting. Marty, looks like you have your hand up.
Thank you. I'm actually answering the previous question, so I'll just like create some time for people to figure out the answer to the question you just asked. But I just wanted to back up Sunny's point about, I think part of the challenge the PUC has in engaging community in this particular docket is that you're dealing in a context where community input has not been taken to heart and implemented in the past. And so it's a challenge to get people to engage at this stage. And so just recognizing that's the context that you're operating in, I think the PUC and Hawaiian Electric and, you know, the community-based developers that are helping communities to develop clean energy, they all need to meet community where they're at. In my mind, that means going to the places where they are at. So instead of trying, you know, in addition to holding these kinds of meetings where you call people to you, try to find ways in which you can efficiently go out to where the community is at. So going to farmers markets, going to community associations and neighborhood boards, and just all of those kinds of, you know, places where you are anticipating there being challenges, you know, overtly visiting those communities and seeking their input without a project in mind, you know, just to get feedback, to get kind of a baseline of what are the kinds of things that a community might be willing to entertain as a potential new project in their area. And yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Marty. Ryan, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'll address both questions, how we kind of discussed in our group briefly. And one of the points I made was I think some of the basic things haven't been done in this case. I noted that I think the HRS requires publication on certain community meetings. I'm not sure there was ever any publication done on any of the meetings associated with this. That seems like the place to start, right? You start with what the law says for all the other community meetings or public meetings the PUC has, and you do that. I mean, and it kind of, you know, when I realized that, I realized, well, heck, that's why they have the law, so they make sure they do it, right? And, you know, if there's a overhead line in a residential neighborhood, there's an automatic community meeting, right? And there's an automatic publication. That's the very basic stuff. And it seems like, you know, I don't know what any outreach has been done thus far. Other than just putting on the PUC's website. I don't know what social media outreach has been done. You know, I think that's the way a lot of outreach is done these days. I've noted that in the past, that's one of the big issues, right? Is you have these developers come to town and they hold community meetings, but then no one knows about it. And they say, oh, we put it on our social media. Well, the social media company from the whatever company that does energy in a foreign country doesn't have a big Hawaii social media presence, so no one knows about it. You know, little things like that. I think, you know, does a PUC even have a social media presence? And then I also say just start with the basics. Palakiko had some great points about just Googling Native Hawaiian organizations and sending them the info saying, hey, come to the meeting, right? I noted there's a number of, you know, pretty other involved interveners or other utility Native Hawaiians that someone could reach out and call. I mean, I think part of the problem is everyone depends on the community to bring the other community members, right? I mean, we're busy. I wanted to, you know, so that was my point about, you know, meeting people here is I appreciate all the novel thinking, but let's just start with the basics, right? Let's put an ad out in the newspaper. Let's put an ad in the Civil Beat. Let's get some radio ads, right? HPR, yeah, stuff like that. And then moving on, talking about the tracks, I think it's really, really hard to talk about the tracks and talk about moving forward when we don't have anybody at the table. You know, I really appreciate Tyler Law's question about who's first time here. I have a similar question. Who's paid to be here and who's not? I think maybe Sonny, maybe 1 or 2 people aren't paid to be here. Everybody else is probably paid to be here, right? That's a problem. That's a problem, right? So I don't know how we can move on and talk about, are these the right tracks or anything? We don't have anybody in the room. And I hope I'm not being emotional. I know that these topics hit hard for me because I've been fighting for a long time on them. But so I don't think we can proceed on the other things. I'd also note, you know, it's the cry wolf story that we always heard, right? Is every time we beg the community to come and get involved and then nothing happens. We've talked about this. It's just it breaks it, right? They're never going to come, you know how hard it is to get them to come back again. And I worry about that happening here, right? You know, one of the reasons I haven't emailed everybody in my neighborhood to come participate is because I don't honestly know what's going to go on. And I don't want to bring them all in here and have them say stuff and then have nothing happen, right? Have nothing. And I mentioned this last time. I'm not sure how we can have this equity docket going and talking about these things and have the ongoing RFP just blazing forward, right? And how does that make community members feel when they're just saying these basic things and yet these projects are going on in their neighborhoods? And we now know Hawaiian Electric is a competitor in the RFP. Well, how many Hawaiian Electric members are in this meeting, right? Is that fair that Hawaiian Electric, who's bidding into this RFP, has 30 people in the equity docket pushing agendas? I mean, I appreciate Hawaiian Electric for coming to the table, but I think when you have 3 community members, 30 Hawaiian Electric members, I'm not sure we're going to have an equity docket, to be frank, unless we get more people in the room. I'll leave it at that, and I'm sorry to be emotional, but I mean, this is like our 4th or 5th meeting here, and there's 2 or 3 people in the room, and it's hard.
And thank you, Ryan, for bringing up those issues as a community member. And hopefully I have time, a little more time to speak. You know, we're putting out fires right now. You know, it's great that we're thinking about the future, how we're going to make these systemic changes. But currently, Kahuku, for a prime example, I've been working on this setback, you know, when it comes to siting, equitable siting and proper siting of renewable energy projects, because what happened in Kahuku, and if you all come down to Kahuku, I would be happy to give you a tour. You will come down and see that this is not Pono. What they did and the siting that they did in Kahuku is what's the word to describe it? It's not okay. What you guys did to our Kahuku community is absolutely horrendous. Like, nobody would want to live near these 568-foot turbine 285 feet away from your property line. Is that right to say? But that was approved. That was a variance request that was approved, and we have been fighting for a larger setback. And for years, I've started this before the pandemic, where this resolution that was introduced by our council member before was tabled, right? And then it comes again, we try and reintroduce it again to another resolution, and then it finally gets heard, goes to the planning commission. The planning commission all of a sudden can't support what DPP says, and then it goes to city council, bill 27, 28, 29. It never gets heard. We're waiting for like a year, and then finally bill 10 comes about, and they have to hear it because it's the whole entirety of the land use ordinance, right? But then it never gets heard. And so then it goes to bill 55, like a standalone, and that kind of is on a standstill. And then we've been waiting for months, and then another thing comes up, bill 40, is it bill 41? Bill 41 just comes out recently. So we're talking about years, right? So we're trying to fix the injustice that happened, you know, right now or currently. That's what we're trying to put out the fight. We're trying to fix what to make things better for us, all the while this conversation about equity, how can we do better, you know, is happening. So like, how can we get, I don't know.
Cindy, I don't mean to cut you off. I'm sorry. Thank you so much. We absolutely want to hear all that you're sharing, and it's very important that you're in the room. And thank you for joining us. We hope you continue to participate, and certainly
Yes,
when
and
we
so
start
my
getting
thing
into
is what
the
can
chat.
we do now to demonstrate that the PUC is serious about having an equitable siting, equitable procedure, you know, all the while it's not happening right now, you know? So then how then can we come and have these conversations when we continue to hear these current projects, like Ryan mentioned, is keep going forward without equitable siting, you know, procedures, right? So I don't know,
So
it's just really hard.
as an example, and just to ensure that all folks on the call are aware too, you know, that in particular is even a track that we proposed. And it's a 2-year process even that we've proposed, and we certainly would love to hear even feedback on the proposed timing. So that is even a specific question. Is 2 years the appropriate amount of time? Is it, you know, we're looking for feedback in early August, which is just a couple weeks away. You know, what specifically, particularly on like the timeline and, you know, the structure that we are trying to put forth to allow for some guardrails to this process.
So does that mean any of the projects that are ongoing that are already approved, like there's no way to have more of an equitable process? Like, is this only projects going forward from this certain date on that it's going to be in, that's going to make those changes? Does that make sense? It's like, well, like I get that we're having these conversations of how can we make these systemic changes to make it better, all the while we have all these current projects that are just been not so good or not like happening in the right way. So how do you balance all of those out, right? And I guess that's the frustration with the community, right? Like, will this make a difference? And what will you do with the current ongoing issues and the inequity that is happening currently in the current dockets or the past projects that needs to be, you know, fixed to have it more of a Pono, I don't know, process.
Sunny, if I could jump in just to maybe, I don't know, respond with my own personal thinking and on these questions that you're raising. I think it's something we've struggled with at the PUC as well in sort of visioning for this docket, right? Because legally, you know, we have to follow process, particularly for dockets that are open or projects that are under consideration at the PUC and with those processes right now. So, you know, I think in this docket, what we're trying to do here is balance, you know, taking quick action and showing that we are serious about this with, you know, wanting to set up process that will allow us to do it better going forward. So I think what we're trying to solicit here is like, does this work plan demonstrate to you, to communities, that we are trying to take that sort of quick action on issues that we can take action on, while balancing the need to, you know, move at a speed of trust and really build those processes thoughtfully. So I definitely hear you. I think, you know, for certain projects that might be under consideration or, you know, that have already been litigated at the PUC, I think there are other forums that are probably better suited for that. But welcome ways that we can improve this work plan to address like both quick and meaningful action, low hanging fruit with process improvements that'll set us up for long-term success.
Thank you, Grace, and thank you, Sunny, for the continued engagement. Do other folks have thoughts, comments, ideas, suggestions? This is certainly a great opportunity to chime in. Okay, guess it's perfect as it is. No, thank you though for all of the engagement, both within this large general session and of course in our breakout groups. Maybe folks are more comfortable in that space. And again, you have an opportunity to continue to comment, particularly on the work plan in the context of the docket, in the sense of filing comments, filing feedback. Let's see, how are we doing on time, Pete? I think we have a few minutes still, yeah. But if there's no, oh, go ahead.
Well, if there's any other comments for this session, I mean, if not, we can go to a quick break before we jump into the next breakout group.
Okay, we just want to create that space. So if there's any final comments or anything you want to share, particularly that was engaging from your breakout group, this is a good opportunity to do that.
One thing that is great is the number of community members at this meeting is larger than the previous meeting, and it's more than 2 or 3 at this meeting.
Yes, that is true, and we hope to see that number grow. Okay, any other breakout rooms? I think we had 5 rooms, yeah, so anything that you think would be valuable to raise as our large group here?
I'll follow up on Grace's question. So I guess my re-highlight my question. What will the impacts of the equity docket be on the ongoing RFP?
Would someone from the PUC like to comment?
No, I'll answer that. I'll answer that.
Oh.
Obviously, this equity proceeding is just starting, and we can't assume that it will be imposed on open proceedings with interveners already in it. So obviously this is something that has been needed for a long time, but it can't get ahead of itself.
Did the PUC want to take a swing?
I can give it a shot, but I don't know if this is going to be a satisfying answer, but we don't know. Is part of it. We're really feeling both in the breakout groups and in these open sessions, there's some tension between moving fast and moving slow, and we're not sure. We're not sure where this process is going to take us. One of the real goals we have here is to try and co-create this process with the community, and we've heard a lot of folks say we might need to do more outreach just to get the right people at the table before we start developing solutions. But there is real tension with some of the ongoing procurements, and I think if to the extent we can incorporate some of the things we learned from this docket, we certainly want to. We want to make those as good as we can make them.
I guess would it be appropriate at some point to consider suspending the RFP until we got to some resolution on the equity process? Is that I mean I hate to get to another Napumakani situation where these projects have gone forward and there's been no community outreach, or it's been just the traditional process where they have a meeting, everyone says something, and then they go on, and there's no impact on that. At least that's been my experience with previous community outreach meetings. So I guess that's at least when I talk to community members, it's like, how do we have an equity docket and then also have the RFP going forward? It's like, would it make sense to say, hey, let's hold back on this extremely large procurement of energy until we figure out how we address the issues that have impacted the community? And as Palakiko noted earlier, these impacts are really going to be focused on Native Hawaiian and these low income communities. And I just hate to get in another situation where there's more protesters or something like that. And I think that as these projects get bigger and bigger, even the solar projects may have protests. So I mean, that's the tension I see is like, maybe we should just have that frank conversation. Maybe we should slow down the RFP to meet up with the speed of the equity docket so we can bring everybody along in that process.
Okay, thank you again, Ryan, for sharing. We certainly are trying to create space for many voices. So please, if you're inclined, jump in.
I just wanted to say really quick that I love all the conversations that are happening right now. I think all of it kind of needs to be heard and needs to be said. I just want to remind everyone that there are a few community members here, and myself being new to DCA, I'm not 100% familiar with all the verbiage. And so when you guys say RFP and you guys use acronyms, I'm not following. And I just want to remind everyone going forward, as we hopefully continue to have more community members involved, to make sure that we're speaking in terms that everyone can understand, because we want to make sure everyone's included. So again, I'm not saying to, not have these discussions, because I think they need to be had and definitely need to be discussed. I'm just opening the floor to maybe a little bit more of a, giving people maybe a little bit more context, or maybe not using as many acronyms, just so everyone can follow, especially for the new people here. We don't want to discourage anyone from not wanting to join because they're not understanding the conversation.
Thank you, Valerie. Great points. It can be an alphabet soup sometimes for us folks to be throwing around all the acronyms. So thank you. Very good point. Any other comments or questions at this time? And again, coming up here in a minute, we'll have a bit of a break and then an opportunity to reconvene in breakout rooms again, this time for the 5 tracks. So if you are really passionate about or interested specifically in one of those 5 tracks, you'll have an opportunity to self-select for those groups. We won't do a reconvening after that session in terms of the plenary discussion, but there will be an opportunity for some final comments or next steps at the closeout of today's meeting. It's hard to believe we've only got a half an hour left. It feels like we could be on for kind of a while.
I do have one question. We're talking about affordability when it comes to electricity, right? I feel like we have a huge issue of energy poverty here in Hawaii. We know that a lot of our local residents cannot afford to pay their electricity bills because of how expensive it is. And we do know that we have one of the highest, if not the highest, electricity rates in the nation. So when it comes to figuring out affordability moving forward, I guess in the future, because that's what we're discussing, how do we ensure that our electricity rates are affordable? As from a public standpoint, it's extremely hard to understand that for a public utility, HECO has one of the highest paid CEO. I think just like a few years ago, it was like the highest paid CEO in Hawaii and top 10 in the United States. So we're talking about, I think, 5 million. All the while, we have the highest paid, highest electricity rate. So like, to me, it doesn't make sense, like, how does that work for a public utility? How do we ensure, and we have a monopoly, we only have one, HECO. So how do we have the checks and balance, and how does PUC come in to ensure that the residents aren't getting overcharged? You know what I mean? And who strikes that balance? Is it the public utilities, or can HECO set the price however they want? And it's just from a public standpoint, it's just mind-boggling. That doesn't seem very equitable. That doesn't seem like the CEO getting paid like 5 million, all the while residents are struggling. Like how does PUC ensure that? I don't know. Does this seem right to you guys? How do you make, I don't know. How do you make electricity rates more affordable for local residents?
Just as a clarification, HECO is allowed to make a certain profit, and we can disagree about the amount of profit, but the money goes up to Hawaiian Electric Industries, which is not regulated by the PUC. And Hawaiian Electric Industries can do one of 3 things with the money: give it to the shareholders, invest it, or give it to their CEO. So if they cut the amount of money they're giving to their CEO, they could invest more, or they could give shareholders more, but it has nothing to do with how much HECO. It's not HECO, it's an unregulated parent company.
Well, maybe that's the problem.
Well, this is an important discussion, and I think it's a good segue into our next section, which is on which is an opportunity for breakout group sessions, with one of them being the affordability track. So I encourage you to continue to hold on to those thoughts and keep those in mind for that discussion in the interest of time. And so we don't take too much time away from our actual discussions during that, I'm going to propose that we just take a quick 5-minute break here and return at 4:35, and then we'll jump into those breakout groups and continue the discussion for the remainder of the period we have today. Thanks.
Sounds great. Thanks, Pete. Thanks, everyone. Enjoy the break. As you're reconvening here, you'll see up on the screen, we have some instructions for how we'll take on this next round of breakouts. You will have an opportunity to self-select into which of the 5 topics that you have interest in joining. We will be able to meet for about a solid 25 minutes, which is great. Maybe closer to 20 to give us a little time there at the end for some next steps. And we will also, just to keep in mind, be conducting a poll at the end too. So you can actually offer any final comments or ideas that you might have at the end. So Pete, I will turn it over to you. Anything else to mention before we head off into these breakout rooms?
No, I think that's pretty good. Just you'll note that there's a button at the bottom of your screen. Hopefully, if it says breakout rooms, I'm going to open them right now. The breakout rooms are titled based on the tracks. Feel free to jump into whichever one you'd like to provide some discussion on. And then the poll will have opportunities to provide additional comments both on this meeting and on the tracks and work plan as well.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Folks are starting to filter back from their groups. Okay, let's see. First off, just thank you to everyone for joining today. I don't know about other breakout groups. I hope they were as robust and passionate as ours. So it's just great to hear all of the voices that were comfortable sharing today. We certainly encourage more discussion. Yes, at this stage, we have asked for comments within the docket by August 4th. We'll certainly also take what was shared in these last 2 feedback meetings to inform some next steps in our discussion at the PUC and in our continued engagement with all of you and others as well. Let me just ensure that this is being shared. This is the next step slide. This is also an opportunity to chime in again in the chat if you feel like you didn't have an opportunity, or if you would like to share any further thoughts. Feel free to use the chat before we close out the meeting today, which we do have a few more minutes. Again, you can continue to find information about the development of this docket and the various steps in the process at the PUC website, and also in particular at the Equity Docket website. The PUC docket number, which most of you are familiar with, 20220250. But if you do have questions about any of these elements, you're always welcome and encouraged to reach out to us here at the PUC as well. We can help guide you through just even the process of filing. So again, as the work plan proposed, we are looking to finalize the work plan after feedback in the next few weeks. And again, we'll certainly take in all of the wonderful and important comments and ideas that were shared today and 2 weeks ago. And then lastly, we do have a participant poll. Pete, I will turn it over to you if there's anything else you'd like to share as we go to close out the meeting and before we offer an opportunity to, again, share your final thoughts through this poll.
Thanks, Ashley. I don't have anything additional to comment. I just typed the whole link into the chat if you are not able to just transcribe it from here. This poll, it's pretty short and sweet, just asking, if you have any other comments you haven't been able to provide via this meeting or don't plan on providing via filing comments, and feedback on how this meeting went and anything else you'd like to provide. It'll be open until midnight tonight, so there's plenty of time if you need to take a break or have other things want to come back around to it tonight. And we have captured the notes from the meeting today, and the notes from the meeting 2 weeks ago were posted, and similarly, these notes will be posted as well to the docket and available via the commission's website as well.
And thank you again to everyone for both participating today. Just taking a quick scan of the room, looks like a couple folks. Stephanie, did you have a comment that you wanted to offer here at the end? It looks like you have your mute button off.
I just had a quick question, which is that the conversations that were shared in the small groups, are those part of the official notes of this convening or not?
So I believe our approach is we are definitely capturing those comments, not necessarily attributable to you and your organization. It's more to ensure we've offered that feedback, but open it up to other folks in the PC to affirm that. I think that was our decision there. Yeah.
So we're capturing those notes and summarizing them, and they'll be posted, but not attributed to any individuals.
The item, the poll EV in the chat is not copyable.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm not sure if there's a way to, here, let me try again. There you go. Sorry about that. That one should be copyable.
Mahalo.
Yes, mahalo to you, Henry, and to everyone that joined today. A lot of very meaningful feedback and engagement. So thank you all for taking the time. We'll leave this open for a couple of minutes if you want to add any other comments in the chat. Have a great evening, everyone.
Have a happy evening.
Good evening, everyone. Bye.
Okay, we'll give it about 1 more minute and then we'll close out the Zoom, just ensuring that folks have a chance to chime in with any final thoughts in the chat. Okay. Thanks, everyone. Again, we really appreciate all of your participation and engagement today. Have a good evening. Mahalo.
Thank you, Ashley.
Thanks, Ashley.
Thank you, Ashley.